All right, as we indicated, live coverage by my colleagues Aldrin St. Pierre and Leanne Manus, who are watching activities very closely today at the coronation in London of King Charles III. Colleagues, a very good morning to you. Great to see you. Aldrin St. Pierre, Leanne Manus, you'll be bringing us all that live coverage today, all the pomp and ceremony, tight security. Who will you be crossing to this morning?
Well, good morning, Criselda, and thank you so much. Yes, it is the build-up to the coronation that's taking place this morning in London, and of course all of the pomp and ceremony. The coronation of King Charles III's crowds have been gathering for days, hoping to catch a glimpse of the king himself, as well as the Queen Consort Camilla, who will also be crowned in today's ceremony at Westminster Abbey. And of course, Leanne is joining me for this special broadcast.
Indeed, I am, and it's wonderful to be with you until, of course, the main proceedings begin, which is about 12 o'clock our time, and we will take that live and watch everything as it unfolds. In fact, we've been watching it the whole morning. We've been watching the guests arrive, the people gathering on what looks like a rather cloudy, rainy day out in London. They're lining the streets all the way from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. And that, of course, is where the ceremony will begin. And that, of course, it'll take place there. It is a religious ceremony, and it's been fascinating for me. I know we were off for a little bit. I was watching some of the religious leaders that were arriving and coming in and taking their seats, and from all different denominations. But this is going to be overseen, of course, by the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we know that the king has been king since the moment his mom, the late Queen, passed away. But this is the religious part of it. And they, of course, have done this before. The last time we saw it was 70 years ago when the Queen, of course, did this particular coronation 70 years ago. And now, of course, it's Charles who's been waiting 74 years for this moment. It is his turn. So that's what it's all about.
One of the guests was actually saying that he has been preparing. He has been in an apprenticeship for over 70 years now. And here his moment has arrived. And he will this morning be coronated as King Charles III. And as Leanne has indicated, of course, he's been king ever since the passing on of his mum, Queen Elizabeth, who has been on the throne for 70 years, which has been quite an extraordinary stretch, the longest serving monarch that we know of.
And, you know, it has been quite amazing, but I think we're going to talk more about this the entire broadcast. But what's so nice is we've got John Bevir, who is there. So let's chat to him and find out how things are panning out there.
Good morning, John. Tell us about the atmosphere in London.
Well, the atmosphere here is definitely one of excitement and anticipation. As you said, this has been a coronation a long time in the making. The vast majority of people in this country weren't around when the last coronation took place 70 years ago. So for a lot of people, this is new. This might be something they only see once. Of course, with the Queen's funeral and before that, the Platinum Jubilee, there have actually been a few years now of major royal events, which is very unusual. But London is bustling. There is a huge security operation going on. You can probably hear there's a helicopter in the background behind me. There are road closures here where we are in Westminster, stretching from here all the way north of Buckingham Palace. A huge section of central London is closed off. They are taking security very seriously, but certainly as we've seen, these people lining the route of the procession just so they can catch a glimpse of this first event like this in 70 years. There have been people camping out for days. We saw people in their 70s who'd done 2 nights in a tent just so they can see this procession go by, and people come from round the world. So definitely an air of excitement, but of course with any major royal event, of course the questions begin about whether they should receive any public money, about what the benefit of the royal family is. So all of those questions again being asked as well.
Seen from the royal family side, in an interview actually with Princess Anne as well, she had said that there is a role that the monarch still has to play in terms of support of the government, but also looking at the potential tourism attraction that this event would bring.
Yes, certainly, and I think that is probably one of the major arguments when it comes to keeping the monarchy, as well as the tradition and the history and the fact that it is part of British culture and British identity. And of course, it allows Britain to bring people here to see them. The tourism boost from the monarchy is huge. I was talking to someone from Visit Britain, the major tourist agency here, who said that the royal family is a key factor in attracting people to the UK. And of course, people don't just come to London to see the royal family as well. They come here to see Buckingham Palace, but also, of course, there are palaces and castles around the country. And so that is a huge draw, especially for the American tourists. A friend of mine is a tour guide, and he says he has had non-stop bookings from American tourists over the last few weeks, and has got for the next few weeks as well. All of them here kind of tied in with the coronation, all of them liking the idea of seeing Buckingham Palace and seeing that. So I think certainly that tourism element and the money they bring in is a huge part of it. But of course, plenty of people struggling with the cost of living, plenty of people with lots of issues who would say, well, actually, there needs to be no public money spent on an unelected head of state. We've heard this morning, actually, that the head of the group Republic, the anti-monarchist group, he's actually been arrested this morning. They were holding a protest in Trafalgar Square, not far from here. He was arrested. There is some talk that the police thought him and some of his colleagues in this anti-monarchist group might have been trying to get ready to chain themselves somewhere as part of a protest. That's one of the theories that's being talked about at the moment. So the police have arrested him, which they are legally entitled to do so. But of course, a lot of people would say that's just not right. That's not what should be done.
John, you talk about the money side of things, and I think that that's a very important aspect because as you rightly painted a picture of the financial situation that the United Kingdom find themselves in, people are jobless, professionals have not worked forever, and besides that, there's also the issue of an increase in salary. Let's talk about the amount of money. I mean, it's almost to a certain extent that the royal family or the monarchy is the real tourist attraction, but you talk about the actual monetary figures. Does it way up when it comes to what they bring in as opposed to how much is paid to keep this lifestyle going? I mean, numbers of £100 million are being thrown around for this coronation day, the amount it was spent to bury the Queen, the same for Prince Philip, and all of the other weddings that are held, you name it, everything we've watched. Is it worth it?
Yeah, and that is, of course, the big question. Now, the royal family have not made it public about what this coronation is costing. Partly they say that's because they don't know what the security costs is at the moment, and so that's only something they can reveal afterwards. But certainly just the cost of policing. This is the largest operation in Metropolitan Police history. That's the force here in London. So, of course, you have the cost of all of that as well. There's a very complicated funding arrangement for the royal family. They own huge sections of London and other parts of the country, and they make a lot of money in rental income, for example, or land fees down in southwest England. They own huge tracts of land which farmers pay to use, and fishermen pay to moor in their waters. So all of that money goes to the royals. That money is then given to the state, and then the state gives some money back to the royal family. What we have heard, though, is that this is a royal family now with Charles at the head of it, who is keen to try and slim things down, probably aware that exactly these sort of arguments happen all the time as to the cost of this all. So it's very difficult in terms of working out whether the royal family are worth it. Certainly people who like the royal family will say, yes, of course they're worth it, and point to tourism, as we've discussed. And those who don't like them will say, well, look, any public money spent on them would be better spent on schools and hospitals and job creation and helping people in poverty. So we have all of those questions. And of course, with all of this, we have a royal family, this ancient tradition here in the UK, desperate to stay relevant. So that, of course, is something that they're going to be grappling with over the coming days, weeks, months, and even years to work out what role they can play in the 21st century.
And of course, now we're also seeing visuals outside the Buckingham Palace, and the King as well as Queen Consort have now arrived at Buckingham Palace. They will move from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey John, speak to us about that route and also some of the significant differences compared to when Queen Elizabeth was being coronated, and also taking into consideration that this time around you have 2,300 guests who have been invited, and with Queen Elizabeth there were about 8,000 people in attendance.
Yeah, and that's all part of this aim to try and slim this down and to have this being less lavish and less extravagant. I say all of that, of course, we are still going to have a coach made of gold pulling along a king and a queen. So we have to be very realistic that what the royal family say is not extravagant is not what the rest of us would describe as not extravagant. But you're right, the numbers have been slimmed down. This procession route goes from the palace. We will see this huge display of pomp and ceremony. There have been marching bands marching through central London all morning from about 7 a.m. local time, all getting into position ahead of this procession. And as we said, people have been camping out for days in some occasions to get a place right at the front by the barriers so that they can see this going by. It might be their only chance to ever see it. So yeah, it's going to be an incredible spectacle, but of course, as we've discussed, we have these wider issues. We have one UK newspaper, The Guardian, that have actually been putting in a lot of work as to the cost of the monarchy at the moment and whether it's worth it. They've also been doing things like exploring their links with slavery back several hundred years ago. So this is a moment that people will reflect on the royal family. I think for today what we're going to see is all of this pomp, all of this ceremony, and then we're going to have those harder conversations about what role they should play going forwards.
Well, John, it's Sophie here. This comes at a time where many people are asking whether the king will be able to modernize the Commonwealth as member countries are yearning for transformation and change. Is this being discussed by the monarchy in general, including those who might take over power? Because we can see that Prince William is waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. The monarchy's role when it comes to the Commonwealth and comes to the history of the British Empire is a very difficult one. There is no doubt that generations ago, the monarchy very much became wealthy and became more powerful because of the mistreatment and the suffering of others. And certainly that was the mistreatment and suffering of others in foreign countries, many of whom, of course, were in Africa. And like we have said previously, there are links with the slave trade and money gained through the slave trade. So there is a very difficult conversation to be had, not just about the history of the monarchy, but going forward as well, as you say, in terms of this modernisation. There were plenty of people, I think it was 44% of people said that actually maybe Prince Charles should remain as Prince Charles and he should have let his son William take over and have this longer reign than he will be able to have to add in some more stability after, of course, William's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, was on the throne for over 70 years. So there is a very difficult conversation as to the monarchy's involvement in British history, which in itself is murky and dark. So, of course, this is a conversation that needs to continue happening. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if we have some Commonwealth countries in places like the Caribbean exploring whether they want to still be associated with the monarchy going forwards over the next few years.
John, I am watching the rain pouring onto you and behind you on the streets there. I suppose nothing that the people of London are not used to. So do you think this will keep the crowds away or not a chance? They are going to go there and be fans and try and spot as many of these dignitaries you're speaking about as they can, and especially the King and the Queen Consort.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think people will have their coats on, will have their umbrellas up, have booked their train tickets to get to London, have booked their hotel rooms many weeks, if not months ago, and rain isn't going to put them off. We are, of course, British after all. We are used to this. We call this liquid sunshine around these parts. So that is very much something that people will just get on with, I would think. It is, of course, a shame. We saw for the Queen's funeral, the weather was incredibly good, and we heard people like Visit Britain saying what an amazing spectacle it was, and attracting people to come to this country and seeing London in all its splendour. So of course they will be very disappointed that it's raining, but I think for the die-hard royal fans who have been sleeping in tents for days in a very cold, it's been a very cold and wet spring coming into early summer, they are not going to be put off by this. So expect to see London absolutely full.
So somebody who's not necessarily that used to the liquid sunshine anymore is Prince Harry, or Harry, because he's going to be there. And I mean, if you don't mind, John, let's focus on Harry for a moment, because it is still, whether we like it or not, the world is going to be watching the role that Harry is going to be playing. We know that he's not part of any of the formal events that are going to be taking place in terms of the ceremonial events. He, in fact, will be sitting in the third row, so that's quite far away. Meghan will not be with him. The children are not going to be there either. They, in fact, the one, Archie, is having his birthday today. So the role of Harry in all of this, and the attention that people are going to put on him on this big day.
Yeah, absolutely, and we saw that at the Queen's funeral as well, didn't we? And the fact that Harry's wife Meghan is not coming, well, a lot of people say, you know, this is not just a mother who's decided to spend an extra weekend with her children. Of course, like you say, it is her child's birthday, so nobody can blame her. But of course, when you have the eyes of the world on you, and as much as they've been asking for privacy, they of course go courting things like Netflix exclusives and interviews with Oprah Winfrey and things like that. So of course they are very much still in the public eye. It is a huge topic of conversation, but Harry is no longer a working royal. So although there will be a lot of cameras focused on him, there'll be a lot of media attention in here, the Americans as well, because of the American link, of course, they are very interested, but he doesn't have a huge role in today. So he'll be here more as a bystander rather than someone getting very involved, such as the new Prince of Wales, Prince William, as most people know him. He, of course, will have a much more active role as the heir to the throne. Of course, Harry, I think, is a distraction for the royal family. Something, you know, all of us have issues with our family at one time or other, but of course, most of us don't have those issues under the glare of the international media.
Yeah, certainly. And at the end of the day, it is King Charles's son, and that's the reality. But John, I know you've got to go, and we've got to end this. But you speak about the working royals and who's going to be there and who's not, and not any more ceremonial roles. But of course, Prince Andrew. I mean, we haven't even spoken about Prince Andrew as well, because this is another individual. I mean, we know there are 11 working royals. That's what we do know. Where's Prince Andrew in all of this?
Yeah, we don't expect him to play a very prominent role at all. Of course, the allegations against him and his involvement and friendship with convicted sex offenders, this is all, of course, highly, if we just look at the impact that has on the royal family, it's highly damaging, of course. A lot of people would say, actually, we need to be concentrating on the victims of this abuse from people that Andrew was associated with. Of course, he has never been found guilty of doing anything wrong at all, but just by association, of course, he has had a hugely damaging effect on the royal family. He will be visible today, but I wouldn't expect he is going to play much of a role at all. So there will be a lot of column inches written about him, of course, but I think the royal family are very much trying to make this all about the pomp, all about the ceremony, celebrating what Britain can do when it comes to occasions like this. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm sure you're going to have a good time watching it all, because the spectacle and the occasion here, you really can feel it. So I very much hope that comes across to viewers of SABC when they're watching this and enjoying this. And in the meantime, like you say, I've got to go, and I'm off to go and get an umbrella.
Yeah, and enjoy the liquid sunshine there as well.
Indeed.
So I have to say, though, the interesting bit about all of this and what's happening is that, you know, with Prince Harry, he's not the only controversial figure.
No.
You know, if you look back at, for instance, King Edward VIII, when he decided to abdicate the throne, and he wanted to go and marry his wife, who was a divorcee.
Indeed, and he was in that position for 11 months. He
Yep.
never had a coronation, so that was sort of, they were still in the planning phases, so he decided he didn't want to, and that, of course, is when the Queen's father became the king,
Yes.
and that's how history has taken its course, and now we're sitting here in the year 2023, where we're seeing Prince Charles taking over.
King Charles III, of course. So Charles III will be crowned king today in Britain's biggest ceremonial event since the coronation of Queen Elizabeth 70 years ago.
Yeah, so today this event will be, as you're saying, on a smaller scale than that stage back in 1953, but it's still expected to be absolutely spectacular. And in and amongst the spectacular, because we haven't even spoken about the gowns and all of the regalia and the crowns and everything you're going to be seeing, there is so much that's going to be taking place behind the scenes that people are going to be watching out for. And that, I think, is what's going to add the excitement to it. So the King, of course, greeted excited crowds that were camped out in London on the eve of his coronation as well.
Well, Charles succeeded his mother when she died last September. 74-year-old Charles will become the oldest British monarch to have the St. Edward's crown placed on his head as he sits upon the 14th century throne at London's Westminster Abbey. As you can hear there in the background, some of the music also playing out there.
Yeah, so let's take a listen to some of the music, and then, of course, we're going to look at some of the social media aspects of this. Well, live visuals and beautiful sounds coming from Westminster Abbey as the build-up to the coronation of Charles III. King Charles III is set to take place. And, of course, stay with us. We will show you that live here on SABC News. So looking very, very forward. Of course, we do know that the Queen Consort and the King are in Buckingham Palace at the moment. The arrival did happen, and of course we will then, of course, watch them move in that the carriage all the way from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. Those were where you saw those visuals coming from. But of course there's so much happening behind the scenes. We're going to bring Stembiso in to talk to us a little bit more about what's happening on social media and how you, of course, can watch this and some of the big key events and moments that will be taking place today. Stembiso, good to see you again. So talk to us. I mean, the sort of lineup and everything that we're about to see taking place today.
Definitely, like we said, we continue to stream that on our SABC News, SABC Plus. You'll know, Leanne, that over, 2,000 delegates have been invited here. Those include the politicians, world leaders, and the royal family. And of course, as we go through the next slide, I
want to interrupt you on the invited guests, because that's an important one. And I want to bring Sophie in here, because you talk about some of the African leaders. Who is going to be in attendance? What do we know about the presence of the continent in this?
Well, we know that the leader of Nigeria, President Buhari, is there. We know that President Mnangagwa is there. President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, is there. The President of Zambia, Hechelema, is there. The President of Malawi is also there. We also have King Muswati of Eswatini. And also we are told that the King of Lesotho, King Letsie, is also expected to attend, and therefore you do have a number of leaders from the continent, and most of these leaders are members of the Commonwealth.
Any representation of South Africa?
Yes, the Minister of International Relations is going to represent South Africa. Our president is currently in Burundi. You know that there's a AU Peace and Security Summit looking at the challenges in the DRC, and of course they'll also look at Sudan. And the president has prioritized challenges facing the continent.
Just quickly on world leaders, though, is that Joe Biden, of course, was invited, but he's not attending. The First Lady, though, is there.
Yes, indeed. When you look at these big countries, one has only realized that it is the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, who is there. When you look at the real powerful nations, your China, your Russia, the countries that are currently in the news, including ourselves, the leaders are not the heads of state.
Okay, let's see what else you have for us there.
Definitely, as you go to the next slide, you'll remember that the King and the Queen are concert there. They really spend time working on the charity in between. Some of the people that are invited there, 800 community representatives being invited there. This is, of course, in recognition of the charity that they do in between. As we go to the next slide, you will know that, Leanne, also there is a Prince Trust that was funded. The initiative there was just to make sure that the foundation is just to look into some of the key things that they are passionate about as the royal family. Let's take a look at some of those high-profile celebrities invited as we go to the next slide. Lion Rich Leanne, that you also saw him.
He's already arrived, right?
Definitely. He's already
stunning.
arrived. And I think the thinking process behind this is just to have those influential people that actually are seen as the ambassadors when it comes to the charities and the trust that they run in between.
Also,
And
we saw
Katy Perry, my favorite
we saw her
artist.
there. We did.
Eye of the Tiger.
Eye of the tiger. Today we get a chance to know some
You're
of
letting your
things.
secrets out the bag. Yes. Eye of the Tiger. That's going to be your new national anthem. Your new anthem. Whenever we have Sophie walking in, we'll play the Eye of the Tiger. But we did see her. We saw Anton Deck. They were there as well. And the Vogue editor. I really incredible to see him there as well. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I know that Tom Cruise has also been invited, but these are all guys that have been involved in the Prince's charities. I'm sorry, in the King's charities when he was a prince. They were there very active in his causes.
Yes, and in the build-up to this, of course, you'll recall that they will be sharing some of the activities outside and inside. A lot of South Africans, once again, on social media, mixed views with regards to the coronation. Others simply saying, why should we care? We have rolling blackouts non-stop. Others simply talking about, say, we are actually keen to see how things are done abroad. Those are some of the mixed views. We'll continue really to reflect them during the course of the procession.
Well, and let's listen into some of the music playing out there at Westminster Abbey. And of course, there you also see the procession outside the Buckingham Palace. And this is where the procession will move from Buckingham Palace all the way to Westminster Abbey. And of course, that's where the main event will be taking place, including the anointing of the King, as well as the homage that will be paid by Prince William. Well, the build-up to the coronation of King Charles III there, and as you saw a bit earlier on outside the Buckingham Palace, and of course there is that one moment that's going to happen, which is going to be a big one, and that is at the balcony of Buckingham Palace, when the working royals, which of course would exclude Prince Harry, will they have the photo op.